Hi, we're back. I'm Lauren, and today we're going to be talking about negotiating the inspection report in a real estate transaction. So, this video is for a buyer, a seller, and an agent. I am going to cover everyone and everything. Now, what I love about what I put together, if I can give myself a pat on the back, is that this episode is not going to just talk about literally how to negotiate. I'm going to start this by explaining to you the mindset and the perspective of a buyer, a seller, and an agent. And then we'll go from there because if you haven't been a buyer and you haven't been a seller, and most people, well, most people are real estate agents. If you haven't been a real estate agent, you don't understand maybe where the agent's coming from or what their experience is. So we're just going to dive into everybody and probably tear a few people apart along the way. And I apologize because this is where things get hairy and get tricky in a real estate transaction. And I think it's because there's not a lot of communication, but there's a lot of projection going on. And so that's why a deal can fall apart. All right. So we're going to start with buyers. And not only are we going to start with buyers, but we're going to break it down into first-time home buyers and luxury home buyers. What's a first-time home buyer? A first-time home buyer is somebody who literally is a first-time home buyer. So they just came out of a rental. Maybe they've been living at home, depending on their age or their financial situation. And they're used to having somebody else do all the work for them. That's a first-time home buyer. Perhaps the first-time home buyer is somebody who, has owned there's 2 houses, maybe 3 houses, but after you've owned 3 houses, you kind of get the drill. So we're going to say somebody who's a first-time and or second-time home buyer. A luxury home buyer is somebody, it's not necessarily price. It's actually more of how many times you've traded real estate. I would say a luxury buyer is how many times you've traded real estate. So if we're going off of that, that person has a lot more experience as a homeowner, as a landlord, as a tenant, as a buyer, as a seller. They are studying the market. They know what's going on. They know that when something breaks in the house, is that a scary repair? Is that an expensive repair? Whereas a first-time home buyer is like, let me call my landlord. They're going to fix it for me. They have no idea how much it costs. They have no idea how important it is to the functionality or the operational side of the house. They simply know that they're inconvenienced because the landlord didn't take very good care of the house, and they're probably kind of pissed. So these are the buyer side, and I will refer to the buyer as a first time and a luxury because my plan is to keep it all separated as we move forward. So now we have the seller mentality. The seller mentality is primarily, I have lived here and it didn't bother me. Why should I fix it for you? Whether they have the money or not, it doesn't matter. A seller has lived with this issue that a buyer wants fixed that didn't bother the seller. You can't really argue with that. As a real estate agent, as we're going into this next mindset, as a real estate agent, we have a better idea, if you're seasoned, what is important and what's not when it comes to the inspection report. But at the same time, every buyer and every seller has their own experience with different items that come up in the inspection report. So the agent mentality, if you are an agent listening to this, please do not be the agent with dollar signs in your eyeballs who just wants to close the deal. I understand that your ego, I understand that your Instagram, and I understand that your bank account, that they all need this deal to close. I get it. I have been there. The truth is, you are walking around with dollar signs in your eyeballs, looking salesy as fuck, and nobody wants to work with that. When people feel pushed, they push you away. If you have somebody's best interest at heart, they also can feel that and lean on you more. So, as much as I hate to rat out some agents, if you are a buyer or seller and you haven't asked your agent if they've ever bought or sold a house, you probably should consider asking your agent that. And if you're an agent who's only been a renter or lived at home your entire life, you should probably consider buying a piece of property, because when you get into a transaction as a real estate agent, you should probably understand what your client is going through. Yes, your job is to protect them, to protect their money, to have a fiduciary relationship with them. Yes, your job is to know the transaction and the timelines and the documents, have the contacts. Yes, those are all important. But at the end of the day, if you haven't been in your client's shoes, you have no idea why they are acting the way they're acting. And the truth is, it comes down to money. It all comes down to money. You might have a multimillionaire client who is fighting over, this is true story, over $30,000. He let his literal dream house go over $30,000. If you don't make $30,000, or it takes you a long time to make $30,000, that's a lot of fucking money. But when you are a multi-millionaire, that's nothing to you. It's like $100 to us, right? But it comes down to money. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to save. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank. It matters how you move forward. And that's how you are a smart investor, right? Because even though you are a homeowner, you're still an investor in your house. Okay, so, oh yeah, agents, I still have more messages for you. You are more than a messenger. And I think that's extremely important to understand, because it's easy to just deliver the message back and forth and not use your brain, possibly because you're a little bit scared, possibly because you're green and you just don't know any better. But the reason why I say and stress that you should put yourself in your client's shoes, and really ideally have the experience yourself, is because when you have a client who wants something, they get so creative. And that's what I love, because when push comes to shove, the client gets creative and they start throwing out these wild ideas. And you're like, oh, I never thought about that. I never thought about that. And then all of a sudden, if you're self-aware, the next time that you're in a situation that has nothing to do with real estate and you really want something, you're pushed against a wall. Now you're getting creative. You're like, well, how can I make it work? I'm desperate. I want to make this work. It's the same thing. It's the same feeling. It's just bigger numbers in a house instead of like something small that you're trying to negotiate on, right? Okay, so now that we have the perspective of all parties involved, I think it's very important to say, at least in the two states that I work, Arizona and Florida, we work off of an as-is contract. Do you know what that means? It means that the seller, by law, does not have to fix anything. It is as is. I'll let that sink in. Most agents don't inform their client that the contract is as is. Now, I keep looking down at my notes because I want to go in order. I wrote it in a well thought out order. So, because the seller does not have to do any fixes, repairs, corrections, replacements, nothing, typically a buyer has two options. When they submit an offer, they either submit top dollar, we'll just call it full price, and then they come in during the inspection period. They get every single inspection known to mankind and then gouge the seller for all the money that they wanted off because they went in a different route. The seller's all excited. We got our number. Oh my gosh, I'm not giving them a penny. And then all of a sudden they see all the work that needs to be done and the things that they thought they were in tune with the house, but really like there's huge problems with the house. And they have a very short amount of time, 5 days in Arizona, to collect their thoughts and figure out what they're going to do, because now all of a sudden they're getting presented with a giant bill. Or the buyer can submit low and say, here's the number that we're offering, and we're offering it because the house needs to be remodeled. The house needs a roof, whatever. And then if you're a mean buyer, you're still going to try and negotiate once you get under contract for the lower price, right? So there's two ways right there for the buyer to get to the seller and get the seller to go under contract. It really just depends. Do you want to negotiate up front or do you want to negotiate after? Now, the counterpart to this is the seller. And every single agent should tell their seller to get a pre-listing inspection. It's $500, $1,000. We'll call it at most $1,500. And this is going to give you insight to the health of your house. If you want to sell your house at a price that you want, you need to have those operational, non-glamorous things checked out in working condition and a good understanding of where you're at. Does it need to be replaced? Does it just need to be serviced? Is it missing one piece? Is the roof work $600? But you know that a buyer is going to see something and be like, oh my God, it's $30,000 for a new roof. Like, do you know how big the house has to be or how many bells and whistles the roof would need in order to get to $30,000? That's not a normal number for a roof. A normal number for a roof is like 10 to 15, but everybody overestimates because they want to make sure that they're getting all their money. Oh, this is a heated topic, you guys. I hope that you're staying with me. All right. I also would like to say, which I know I mentioned it earlier, and I mentioned it earlier because people think that this is included. If the house needs to be remodeled, that is not the seller's problem. And this goes back to the seller mindset of, I have lived with it like this for 30 years. I don't see why it needs to be remodeled. We all know that it doesn't look up to date. It's cosmetically dated. We know that. But that's not the seller's problem. That is not an operational piece of the house. It might warrant a smaller purchase price number. It's not going to, have a high ROI like a remodeled house would for the seller, but that's the seller's choice. If the buyer wants to come in and correct and cosmetically change and update, the kitchen or everything in the house, that is not the seller's problem. That is not a reason to lowball an offer. We use it all the time. Yes, we use it all the time. We mainly use it when it's to our advantage, which is as the buyer. But it's not actually a thing. That is not something, I can't say it enough. It is not something the seller should compensate the buyer for, is the buyer's choice of remodel. It just doesn't work like that. So, like I said, the price for a remodel will naturally be corrected in the supported comps, the sales that have sold around it for different prices. Like, we all have a price range for every house, and that's pretty much untouched, so original condition, all the way up to fully remodeled. And the prices will support the unremodeled version of the house. So let's actually get to the inspection report. Buyers, and we're going to go into first-time buyers and luxury home buyers again. A first-time home buyer wants that resale, keyword, to be perfect. It is not going to be perfect. It is used. It has been lived in. Now, a luxury buyer, on the other hand, understands, again, the severity of different items in the report and pretty much the cost it will take, because they have the knowledge. They also have the money. They're not afraid to spend the money, but they also have the experience of what things cost. They also know what they like, what's important to them. As a first-time home buyer, I always see home buyers, they ask, what would you do? And the first thing I explain to a first-time home buyer, and really to any buyer who's under contract, is that if you give the seller a laundry list of things to do, the answer will be no. Or they are going to be a total dick and they're going to say, sure, I'll fix one GFCI in the kitchen. Huh, really? That's it? That's all? Well, yeah, if you're handed an entire laundry list, AKA almost everything on the inspection report, your response is going to be, F you, dude. I am not doing this. This is not what I signed up for. The answer is no. They're going to hope that the buyer goes away and a new buyer comes in, and the seller will have a more of an amicable inspection period with the next buyer. So what do you do? This is what I do. So if you are an agent, feel free to steal it. I have the buyer sit down and go through the inspection report with whomever is important to them. I sit down and I go through the inspection report, and we individually make a list, and then we get on a call or we meet in person and we go over everything on the list that's important to each of us. Of course, when I pick something that is not on their list, they're probably like, well, why do you think that? And simultaneously, if I'm presenting that to a luxury buyer, I'll say something and they're like, no, I'm good. I don't need that. but my job is to protect my client as the buyer's agent. So whether they're luxury and are buying a $5 million property or they're a first-time home buyer, your job is to make sure that you get your buyer's inspection requests fixed, repaired, replaced, or a credit for it. So that's the difference when a first-time home buyer and a luxury home buyer submits the inspection report. The buyer wants everything done, and the luxury person is like totally fine with almost everything being in disarray, as long as it's not electrical or plumbing. You know, they really just focus on the big ticket items. Now, agents, back to you. If you are a buyer's agent and there are big ticket items on there, even if it's just handyman work, if there's any work, let's be real, please go get your quotes. And when you get those quotes, submit them with the requests that you want to have fixed. Because if you ballpark a number, like I said, the roof earlier, it's $30,000. Well, dude, it's like a 1,400 square foot house. That's impossible to have a $30,000 roof. It just is. Now the seller feels like the buyer's just trying to get money out of them. If the buyer submits a quote with it, now we're talking. The seller has two options. Which seller? We're back to you. I highly suggest that you go get your own quotes. Use your own people, especially if you have a hookup. Like, go see what your homie can do for you. And if you don't have a hookup, still get your own quotes to understand, is this roof quote that I received from the buyer and the buyer's vendor, is this legitimate? Is this high? Is this low? Because the buyer might have a homie hookup, and that homie hookup might be, let me price it a little higher to get you a little extra money, right? Like, we just don't know who's doing what. So real estate agents, back to you. If you are representing the buyer or the seller, I highly suggest to go get your own quotes so that you have hard numbers in front of you. And if the buyer's agent and the buyer does not, if the buyer's agent does not submit a quote for any work that needs to be done, I still recommend as a seller's agent suggesting to the seller, let's get quotes. They can say no, but you suggested it. And some people are just going to give a dollar amount. Hey, yeah, I just need, like, we're just going to give them $1,000 and hope that it settles it. There's lots of ways to do this. Okay. I'm not saying that my way is the right way. I'm just giving you tidbits for how to make your business better and for buyers and sellers to understand the gravity of what a quote can do. It just ties everything down. Okay. Now, let's say that the buyer's agent submits the inspection repairs with the quotes to the seller. The seller and the seller's agent will review everything. Let's again say that there is a roof quote. We're going to drop it down to $10,000. The $10,000 roof quote can either be given in three forms. You can either reduce the purchase price by $10,000. The seller can credit the buyer $10,000, or this is something that agents don't really know, and most people are going to give you pushback at the title company, but it's absolutely possible because I do it with every single transaction that needs it. You can take that $10,000 and you can have it. Okay, how do I say this? You can take the $10,000, you give the receipt to the title company, and the title company will connect with the vendor. And on the day of closing, that $10,000 will come out of the proceeds from the seller and be wired to the vendor. Therefore, the buyer still has to come out of pocket for their closing costs, but they're not losing any money because the closing costs were $7,000. And what do we do with the remaining $3,000? So it's super important to get creative and to understand. Again, in a moment of desperation, I discovered that I could do this. This is not something that somebody taught me. It was during COVID, and I needed to get that damn roof credit for my buyer. And this is just what I came up with. And I called my title gal and said, hey, is there any way that we can just give the money to the vendor? And she said, yeah, no one's done that, but yeah, that's fine. Totally works like a charm. Everybody's going to give you shit and everybody's going to try and stop you. It is the best and safest way to do it if the seller's not willing to give a credit. because a credit, buyers listen up and sellers, a credit is technically money in the buyer's pocket so that they have the money to go do the roof repair. If we do a price reduction, it's very simple, 20 to 50 bucks a month, depending on the price point, of course. It's a small, measly amount off of the monthly mortgage payment. It's not like this giant lump sum that you get when you reduce the price. It just comes off of your monthly mortgage payment. And agents, I'm just going to say it, as long as the price is getting reduced, our commission is also getting reduced. So we secretly always want the credit or the money to go straight to the vendor, because if the price reduces, then our commission is reduced. So reducing the price, nobody really benefits from that. So we might as well have some winners here and either go for the credit or go for sending the money to the vendor. So those are my tips. That's like my super deep thought process on negotiating an inspection. I'm not sure what you guys were looking for, but those are the things that I wanted to get across, because this is where, like I said in the beginning, this is where the transaction gets tricky. And on top of it, you have two agents. If you don't have one agent, which is pretty rare, now both of these agents have to get along. They have to work together. And who knows what that communication is? Maybe they've worked together in the past and had a bad deal. Maybe one just rubs one the wrong way and they just don't like each other. You want to make sure that communication is number one. We want to be friendly. We want to be on top of it. We want to make sure that we are educating our clients as the real estate agent in every way, shape, and form. And when you're the buyer, you need to be as informed as you possibly can. And when you are the seller, you also need to equally be as informed as you possibly can, which is getting your pre-listing inspection and having a thorough understanding of your house. Because the buyers will be doing the same exact thing in a few months when you go under contract, and they're going to have more knowledge about your house than you do if you don't have that pre-listing inspection. So this is my rant. Thank you for going through all of my passionate emotions about the inspection and about the inspection report. It's been fun, and I'll see you on the next one.